Welcome back to Nature Documentary for Sleep. If you enjoy this kind of quiet geography, leave a comment and consider liking and subscribing. Tonight, you're stepping onto Aconcagua, where the air runs thin long before the summit shows up. It's pre-dawn at Plaza de Mulas, and your headlamp only finds dust, rock, and tired boots. The temperature feels almost reasonable until you inhale and notice the metallic sting of altitude. You do the small, cruel math. Water left, fuel for melting snow, layers for wind, and a turnaround time you'll actually obey. Because this isn't a snowy postcard of the Andes, it's a high desert above the clouds, dry enough to dehydrate you in the cold. Every step slides in loose scree over uplifted stone, and you spend calories just trying to stay in place. As you start climbing, your breathing gets louder, and simple tasks begin to cost more oxygen than you planned. So what fails first on Aconcagua? Hydration? Heat retention? Or decision-making under hypoxia? When the wind erases your margin. You think the danger starts high, somewhere near the summit ridge where the sky looks sharp enough to cut you. Wrong. It starts here, in the dark, while you still feel almost normal, because the mountain is already taking payments. Quietly, in your breath, you step between tents that shudder in their sleep, and the fabric snaps like impatient flags. A cook tent coughs a thin plume of stove exhaust into the night, and it instantly disappears. The air is too dry to hold on to anything. Warmth, moisture, even smells. You stop beside a rock that everyone uses as a table, and you check your team again. Not in a heroic way, in a boring, practical way, like counting tools before you close a workshop. Headlamp, spare batteries, radio, gloves, mittens, water bottles tucked upside down so the lids do not freeze first, and one detail you do not say out loud, because saying it makes it real. Your pee has been dark since yesterday afternoon. Congratulations, you are already behind on water, and you have not started the hard part yet. A gust slides down the valley, and it does not feel like weather. It feels like the mountain testing the door just to see if it is locked. Fine grit lifts off the ground and ticks against your jacket. It is sand, not snow, and it tells you what Aconcagua really is. A high desert pretending to be an ice mountain, depending on who is looking. You move anyway because motion is warmth, and warmth is compliance. Your boots crunch on scree that never settles. A broken slope that behaves like it is still falling. One step up, half a step down, and your calves do the work of a machine. In the beam of your headlamp, the path looks obvious, a pale ribbon of dust, but the ribbon splits, rejoins, splits again, and every split costs time. This is the first escalation, and it is so small, you almost miss it. You're already choosing between routes, and you have not even reached daylight. You call the group close, and you pick the line that looks more packed down. Not because it is safer, because it wastes fewer calories, and calories are oxygen you will not have later. A few minutes into the climb, your mouth goes sticky. It is an ugly kind of thirst, like you licked a battery. You take a sip from your bottle, and the water is already cold enough to sting your teeth. You swallow carefully, because your stomach is not in the mood for surprises up here. Your teammate behind you coughs once, then again, dry and sharp. They are not sick. This is what the air does. It strips moisture with every breath, and it never gives it back. You pass a boulder the size of a small car, and your light catches scratches across its face. Not claw marks, wind marks. Tiny impacts over years, sandblasting the rock like the world's slowest power tool. Aconcagua was lifted by continental collision, the Nazca Plate shoving under South America like a shopping cart that refuses to stop. And then the wind started sanding the evidence down, creation and demolition running at the same time. You look up, and the silhouette of the mountain is not a peak yet. It is a shoulder, a wide, dark mass blocking stars. The summit does not feel close. It feels postponed. Someone's headlamp flickers, and the beam stutters across the slope. They stop, and their gloves fumble with the battery pack clip. It should take 10 seconds. It takes a full minute. That is the second escalation. Fine motor skills are already getting expensive, and you are still in the warm part of the night. You step back to shield them from the wind, and the gusts find the gap anyway. They always do. The battery clicks in, the light steadies, and you keep moving. You keep it boring on purpose. Slow steps, even breathing. No sudden pushes. It is not bravery. It is budgeting. As the slope steepens, the wind begins to organize itself. It stops arriving in playful bursts and becomes a continuous pressure. It runs down the valley like water, funneled by rock walls you cannot see in the dark, and it makes a sound that your brain wants to interpret as distant surf. Except there is no ocean here, only air moving fast enough to steal heat through seams and zippers. You check your watch, and you do not like the time. You started early, but you are not gaining as much as you wanted. The scree is softer than yesterday. More marbles underfoot, less friction, more sliding. The mountain is negotiating now, and its opening offer is simple. Spend more energy or spend more time. Both are bad. You call a short stop, and everyone hunches automatically, backs to the wind, heads down. You do not sit. Sitting is a trap, because standing up again costs a surprising amount of oxygen. You ask for quick checks, hands, toes, water, headaches. The answers are mostly fine, which means nothing yet. Fine is what you say when you are not sure. You take another sip, and you force yourself to take a second, because you know you will not want to later. Then you tighten your pack straps, because the wind is starting to tug at loose ends. One teammate points up and says they see the line. They do not. They see a faint track that leads into darkness and might be yesterday's route, or might be someone's mistake. You correct them gently, and you angle the group toward the more obvious traverse. That is a decision point, small but real. You choose the line that keeps you out of the loosest rock, even if it adds distance. Distance is predictable. A twisted ankle is not. The sky begins to pale, not with sunrise yet, but with that thin whitening that makes stars look tired. And as the light increases, the mountain's true colors show through. Not alpine white, bruised reds, dirty browns, and gray bands like old scars in the rock. This is not a pretty volcano cone with a neat crater. It is a huge, uplifted mass of sedimentary and volcanic layers, shoved up and then shredded. You watch the slope above you, and you can see the pattern of erosion like a fingerprint. chutes where rockfalls prefer to travel, ribs where harder layers resist longer, and everywhere loose debris waiting for a foot to remind it about gravity. The sun finally hits high ridges, far above, turning them briefly gold. It looks soft. It is not. The sunlight here is a dry spotlight, and it shows you every grain of dust in the air. You feel warmer for a moment, and that warmth is a trap too. Warmth makes you unzip layers. Unzipping invites the wind inside, and the wind does not leave when you regret it. You keep your layers on, and you sweat just a little, the amount that feels harmless. But sweat in this air is a leak you cannot afford. It evaporates immediately, and the salt dries on your skin like a warning label. Your lips start to chap, and you taste blood without biting anything. Another small escalation. You did not lose blood in a dramatic way. You lost it to dryness and altitude, the quiet thieves. You reach a longer traverse where the path cuts across a slope of loose stone. The mountain drops away to your left, a wide emptiness that the dawn is slowly filling in. Clouds sit lower than you, like a pale lake, and for a few seconds, it is beautiful enough to make you forget the cost. But then, a gust hits your pack and shoves you sideways. Not enough to knock you down, enough to make you plant your pole hard and feel the tip skid on gravel. You correct and you keep moving, but your heart rate jumps, angry about the sudden work. Your breathing becomes louder again, and now you can hear it inside your hood. In and out, in and out. A slow bellow sound, like the mountain is teaching you to be a machine. You glance at your teammate's face in the growing light. Their cheeks are already windburned, a raw red that will turn to peeling skin later. Their eyes look glassy, not from emotion, from dryness and fatigue. They nod when you look at them too quickly, like they want to convince you. You ask them to drink. They say they are not thirsty, and you feel the familiar irritation rise. Because the body at altitude lies. Not thirsty means dehydrated. Not hungry means underfueled. Not tired means you are about to be. You stop again, and you make it a rule. 3 swallows each. You watch them do it. You feel like a parent forcing vegetables. Except the vegetables are survival. A few hundred meters later, the wind strengthens again, as if it heard you giving orders. It hits with a steady push now, and the temperature drops in a way that feels personal. Your gloves go from comfortable to barely adequate. You flex your fingers, and you can feel the joints complaining. One teammate pulls out a snack, a frozen energy bar that might as well be a brick. They bite it anyway, jaw working slowly. Chewing at altitude feels like a luxury task, the kind you pay for in breath. They swallow, cough, and shake their head. You file it away. If they cannot eat, their engine will sputter later. And later on, Aconcagua is not a gentle time. The terrain starts to tilt upward more directly, and you can see the broad sweep that leads toward the higher camps. The famous normal route looks like a simple ramp from far away. Up close, it is a treadmill of rubble. You step, the rock rolls, your foot sinks, you push again. Gravity charges you for every mistake, and the receipts come fast. Now the mountain begins its other trick. It makes you feel strong for short bursts. then punishes you for believing it. You take 10 good steps, then you need to stop. Not because your legs are done, but because your lungs are suddenly empty. You stop and you try to breathe deeply, but deep breathing here feels like sucking air through fabric. You look at the horizon, and the distant plains of Argentina are visible through a thin haze. The world below looks easy. The world below looks like it does not require thought. That is how altitude seduces you, by making normal life look like a dream you used to have. Your radio crackles once, a brief burst of static. It is someone else on the mountain, a guide checking in, voice tight from cold. The message is short. Wind picking up above. Nothing unexpected, which is exactly what you do not want to hear, because expected problems still kill people. You do another check of your water, and you can feel how light the bottle is already. You tell yourself you will melt snow later, but you know what the snow is like up high, thin, dirty, mixed with grit. Melting it takes fuel, and fuel is weight you carried for this exact reason. You picture the stove sputtering in a tent that will not stop flapping. You picture gloves off for a minute to adjust the valve, fingers exposed to wind, small tasks becoming arguments again. As the morning advances, you begin passing others coming down early. They move with their heads lowered, like they are returning from a bad appointment. One climber's face is pale and puffy, lips cracked wide. They do not look at you. They just step aside, let you pass, and keep descending. You want to ask, what happened? But you already know the answer will be wind, or headache, or both. You keep going because your own plan is still intact, for now. The path narrows around a rocky outcrop, and here the wind hits with clean force. No shelter, no broken gusts, just a steady stream that makes your jacket flutter and your hood press against your ears. Your breathing syncs with your steps, and you realize you are making tiny noises, involuntary, with each exhale. Not words, just effort leaking out. You glance back, and you count headlamps, even though it is daylight now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Everyone is still moving, but the spacing has stretched, and that is another escalation. Distance on a mountain is not just distance. It is time to help if someone trips. It is time lost if someone stops. It is separation when the wind starts carrying voices away. You wave them closer, and you slow down to let the group compress. And when you slow, you cool. The wind finds the sweat you did not notice, and it turns it into a cold patch on your back. Your body shivers once, a quick, involuntary tremor. You tighten your shoulder straps, and you keep moving, because stopping now would let the chill settle deeper. Ahead, the slope reveals the higher camp zone. Still distant, but now clearly real. Tiny dots of tents on a barren shoulder, like someone tried to live on a parking lot made of rock. Berlin, Cholera, names that sound casual until you remember they are above 6,000 meters, above the point where most bodies start making bad choices. Your stomach growls, then stops as if it remembered where it is. You pull out a gel packet and you squeeze it into your mouth. It tastes like fruit-flavored glue. You swallow anyway. Fuel is fuel. And at altitude, you do not get to be picky. Your teammate beside you tries to adjust their glove cuff, and their fingers hesitate. They try again, slower. The cuff catches. They swear quietly, then laugh once, like it is funny. But their laugh is thin. You lean in and do it for them quickly because your hands still work, for now, and you make a mental note that your own fine motor skills will be next. The mountain removes them in layers, like it is undressing you for the cold. The wind rises again, and you hear it before you feel it. A low roar, steady, coming down from above like water pouring over rocks. It is the valley acting like a funnel, and you are a small object in the stream. Speaking of funnels, your throat feels narrowed too, like every breath has to squeeze through. You stop for one more check and you look at faces. One teammate's nose is running, but the snot dries almost immediately. Another has a white crust of salt at the corner of their mouth, evidence of breathing hard and losing water. You wipe your own mouth with the back of a glove, and the fabric comes away stiff with dried sweat. You do not feel sweaty. That is the joke. The air is stealing water before you can register it as loss. You tell the group to drink again, and you make your voice flat and non-negotiable. They obey because everyone can feel the quiet friction building inside their bodies. Your tongue feels too large for your mouth. Your throat feels like paper, and the wind keeps pushing, steady as a hand on your chest. The trail tilts toward the high camp shoulder, and the ground changes from loose marbles to broken plates. It is still scree, but sharper now, like someone shattered roof tiles and spread them out. Each step makes a small sliding sound, a dry hiss, like the mountain is exhaling under your boots. You think you are climbing a mountain. Wrong. You are climbing a pile of time. Nazca Plate under South America, a slow shove that crumpled rock like laundry in a suitcase. Then freeze and thaw, wind and gravity taking turns tearing it back down. And now you are here, a worn animal trying to walk on the remains. A gust hits, and you feel your pack shift. Not much, just enough to remind you that balance is a luxury item. You shorten your poles, widen your stance, and keep the pace painfully boring. Because excitement up here is usually a symptom. The sun rises higher, and the light turns cruel. It shows you everything you hoped would stay hidden. The dust in your eyelashes, the cracks in everyone's lips, the way your teammates' breathing has become slightly frantic, even when they insist they are fine. You point at the slope ahead, and you name the next rest spot out loud. That dark rock, that bend in the traverse, that little rise. You break the mountain into errands, because thinking about the whole thing is how you waste oxygen. Someone behind you mutters a joke about the view. It is a bad joke, which is how you know they still have enough brain function to be annoyed. You let them have it. Morale is also fuel. The wind carries their words away anyway, ripping them into pieces before they reach you. You keep glancing at hands. Hands are the first betrayal. They go numb, then clumsy, then useless, and then you are a breathing problem with no ability to fix it. One teammate flexes fingers inside their gloves like they are counting invisible coins. You tell them to do it often. You tell them to keep moving the blood like stirring soup that wants to cool into a skin. The traverse steepens again, and the slope funnels you into a broad gully of lighter colored rock. This is where the normal route stops pretending to be a hike. The mountain gives you a direct bill. You stop at the edge of the gully and you let everyone catch up. No sitting, no long speeches, just heads close together in the wind like conspirators planning something stupid. You check the sky. It is a deep, rinsed blue with thin feather clouds smeared high above. It looks stable, it looks friendly, and you have been doing this long enough to know that friendly weather at altitude is often just quiet weather. Quiet weather is what the wind becomes before it grows teeth. You ask for headaches. One person shrugs and says, "A little." You ask for nausea. No. You ask for dizziness. They hesitate and then say, "Only when I stop." Congratulations. That is the mountain teaching them the first rule of hypoxia. When you stop moving, your body notices it cannot pay for thinking anymore. You make them drink. You make them eat. Even if the snack tastes like plastic. Chewing is annoying, yes. Chewing is also a way to force blood to the face and keep the jaw from becoming a useless hinge in the cold. You start up the gully, and the footing immediately turns to sabotage. The rocks move like a crowd that does not want you there. You plant a boot, and the ground slides away, and you have to arrest yourself with a pole. Your calves burn not from heroism, but from stabilizing constantly. This is the mountain removing energy through 1,000 small taxes. You see other teams higher up, tiny figures leaning into the slope. They look slow, like wind-up toys winding down. Every so often, one of them stops and folds forward, hands on knees, breathing into their own chest like it is a paper bag. You keep your team spaced closer now, close enough that if someone falls, you can reach them before they slide. Far enough that if someone kicks a rock loose, it does not hit the next person in the shin. This is what teamwork becomes at altitude. Not friendship. Traffic control, the gully spills you out onto the high camp shoulder, and you can finally see the tents clearly. They are not charming. They are bruised, wind-hammered lumps of fabric, crouched behind rocks like animals trying to survive. The ground is almost flat, but it does not feel like relief. Flat ground up here is a prank because it is exposed. The wind does not have to bend around terrain. It can just hit you in the face and keep going. You walk into the camp zone and you feel the altitude shift in your chest. Not a dramatic change, just a slight increase in the effort of existing. Every breath feels shallower, as if the air has decided to stop meeting you halfway. You smell stove fuel before you see the stoves. A sharp, chemical scent mixed with the sour edge of human exhaustion. Someone nearby is melting snow, and the hiss of their burner sounds like a small argument in the wind. You find your tent spot behind a low wall of rocks that someone stacked weeks ago. The wall is not high. It does not look impressive, but up here, a wall that blocks even a fraction of the wind is worth more than pride. You drop your pack, and your shoulders ache instantly, like they were waiting for permission. Your team starts the practice dance. Tent poles, stakes, guy lines, everything done with gloves, and yet somehow you still have to expose skin at the worst moments. A zipper, a knot, a buckle. Fine motor skills again, standing in line to be sacrificed. You look at the ground and realize it is not ground. It is dust over ice in some places and gravel over hard-packed snow in others. Stakes do not want to stay. You hammer one in and it bites, then loosens, then wobbles like a bad tooth. You end up tying guy lines to rocks instead. Rock anchors, old as mountaineering itself, because the mountain will not let you bring enough metal to pin it down. When the tent finally stands, it shakes in the wind like it is nervous. You crawl inside and the world becomes fabric noise. Flap, snap, flap. The sound is constant, and it will become the soundtrack of your thoughts. You sit on your sleeping pad and you feel the first deep fatigue settle into your bones. It is not the tiredness of a long day. It is the tiredness of being underfed, underoxygenated, and constantly wine-slapped. You pull off a glove just long enough to check your fingers. The skin is pale, wrinkled, already drying out. You put the glove back on quickly, like you are apologizing to your hand. Outside, someone yells a question, but the wind makes it hard to understand. You stick your head out, and the cold bites the moisture in your nose immediately. You shout back, and your voice feels smaller than it should. Even sound struggles up here. You gather the team for a quick reality check, crouched behind your rock wall. You show them the bottles. You show them the fuel. You do not make it dramatic. You do not need to. The numbers do that for you. You plan to melt snow here. You plan to top off every bottle and go into summit day heavy with water. Then you look around at the snow. There is not much. The patches are thin, wind scoured, and the surface is dirty. Not pristine alpine powder. This is desert snow, scraped and mixed with grit, like someone spilled salt on it. You scoop a handful, and it feels more like crushed ice from a gas station, except it tastes like rock dust. Melting it will take fuel. Fuel is weight. Fuel is also time, because stoves at altitude do not behave like stoves at home. They sputter. They cool off in gusts. They make you take your gloves off to adjust a valve that suddenly feels complicated. You do the math again, and it gets uglier. If you melt enough snow for everyone, you burn through your margin. If you conserve fuel, you go into summit day dry. So you compromise, because humans love compromises, even when the mountain does not. You decide on a minimum. Enough to keep urine from turning into syrup. Enough to keep brains from becoming fog. Not enough to feel comfortable. Comfort is not on the menu. One teammate asks if they should eat a full meal. You tell them yes, and you watch their face fall, because food up here is work. You have to chew it, swallow it, digest it with a stomach that is already irritated by thin air. But without it, their body will burn itself. They nod, and they force down something warm from a pouch, grimacing like it is medicine. In a way, it is. You turn to your own stove, and you set it up on a flat rock inside the tent vestibule. The lighter clicks, and for a second you feel relief at the tiny flame. Then the burner catches, and the hiss becomes steady. You feed it dirty snow, a scoop at a time, and you watch it collapse into a small pool of water. It is disappointing how little you get. A whole pot of snow becomes a few mouthfuls. The mountain takes volume and gives you almost nothing back. You pour the water into bottles, and it looks gray. You do not have enough fuel to melt and filter and treat and make it pretty. You add a tablet anyway, not because it will remove grit, but because your stomach does not need more problems. The team settles into tents, and the camp becomes a scattered field of fabric in a wind river. You try to rest. Rest is a funny word. At 6,000 meters, you lie down, and your heart keeps thumping like you are mildly panicking, even when you are not. You close your eyes and you feel the thinness of the air as a physical thing. Your breathing changes on its own. A few deep breaths, then nothing. A pause long enough to make you sit up, convinced you forgot how to breathe. Then a sudden gasp, involuntary, like your body just realized it has a job. Shane Stokes breathing, you think. Naming it like that makes it less unsettling. It does not. It is your brainstem negotiating with physics. You drift in and out of shallow sleep, waking every few minutes to adjust a zipper or listen to the wind, or check that your hands still feel like hands. The wind never stops. It just changes pitch, like an old radio searching for a station. At some point, you hear a sound outside, a small clatter, then a scrape. Rock moving. Not a big rock fall, just a reminder that the mountain is always shedding weight. You picture the whole slope slowly walking downhill, one grain at a time, and you trying to climb against it. You check your watch again, squinting at the numbers. The plan is to leave around midnight. Summit day starts before the day does, because you need the cold, stable morning air before afternoon wind turns the upper mountain into a sandblaster. You force yourself to eat a few bites, even though your appetite is gone. You sip water, and it tastes like minerals and tablet chemicals. You swallow it anyway. Your throat does not care about flavor. It cares about function. Hours pass in fragments. You dream briefly that you are at sea level, and you wake angry at the idea of abundant oxygen. The tent shudders harder, and you realize the wind has increased again. It is not loudness that changes, it is force. The fabric pulls against the lines, and the poles creak. You sit up and you listen like a mechanic listening to a bad engine. Is that sound normal? Is that strain too much? Will this tent still be here when you come back? This is the mental space high altitude creates. Not fear, constant troubleshooting. You check your boots because nothing ruins a summit attempt like boots frozen into unusable shapes. You keep them inside the tent, near your legs, where your body heat can keep them from becoming plastic bricks. You check your gloves and mittens because losing one up here is not inconvenient. It is a countdown. You line up tomorrow's gear in the order you will need it because thinking in the cold takes too long. Headlamp, batteries, spare gloves, hood, buff, goggles, water bottles wrapped in insulation, snacks you can chew without breaking teeth. You set your turnaround time in your head again, and you make yourself feel it as a hard object. Not a suggestion, not a hope, a rule. Because the summit is a liar. The summit always looks close enough to borrow, and it always costs more than you have. Eventually, you hear the first movements in nearby tents. Zippers, muted coughing, someone vomiting quietly, trying not to make it dramatic. You swallow a small sigh because you know what that means. Altitude does not announce itself politely. It just starts rejecting people. You check on your team, one by one, through tent walls and quick conversations in the wind. Headaches, mild, nausea, not yet, breathing, weird. Sleep, none. You nod, Because this is normal. Normal is not good. Normal is just common. When it is time, you unzip your tent and the night hits you like a slap of dry cold. Stars are scattered above, bright and sharp, like the sky has been sanded clean too. The wind is still running, and it makes the darkness feel alive. You step out, and the cold finds every gap immediately. It crawls into your cuffs. It presses against your cheeks. It turns the moisture in your eyelashes into tiny crystals. Your headlamp beam cuts a narrow tunnel through the dark. Everything outside that beam does not exist. This is the first psychological shrink. The mountain becomes only what you can see, and what you can see is a few boots, a few rocks, and the next step. You gather the team in a tight knot of light. Faces look older at night, not because of wrinkles, but because effort strips away softness. You do another gear check, and you listen to the wind while you do it. It has a higher pitch now. That means it is faster. Congratulations, the mountain has decided to speed up the conversation. You start climbing out of camp, and the first steps feel stiff, like your joints were packed in wax. Your body warms only slowly, and the only way to warm is to move. So you move, even though movement hurts at first. Headlamps bob ahead and behind you, and the line becomes a small procession of stubborn lungs. The slope above camp is a long, steady grind, and the ground is still the same broken rubble. But now, it is frozen in places, locked together by cold, which sounds helpful. It is not entirely. Frozen rubble is just rubble that breaks differently. A step that would have slid now can roll, and a roll can take your ankle with it. You plant carefully, and you let your poles take more weight. Your breathing is louder than the wind in your hood. In, out, and each inhale feels like you are getting only half of what you ordered. The air is thin enough that your body starts making small mistakes. Not dramatic, just little delays. You reach for a zipper pull, and your hand pauses as if it has to look for the idea of zipping. You adjust a strap, and you do it twice because you forgot what the first adjustment was meant to accomplish. This is hypoxia's quiet sabotage. Your brain running on a discount oxygen plan, buffering basic tasks like a slow video. The wind strengthens as you gain height, and it stops being background. It becomes a physical object. It pushes on your shoulder when you step. It catches your hood and tries to turn your head. It makes you angle your body into it, like you are walking uphill and sideways at the same time. Spindrift starts to appear, tiny grains of snow lifted from somewhere higher. There is not much snow on the mountain, but the wind can find whatever exists and weaponize it. The grains hit your face like dry needles. You pull your buff higher, and the fabric instantly crusts with frozen breath. A few minutes later, the buff is damp, and damp becomes cold, and cold becomes a small problem that wants to grow. You keep moving. You force the pace to stay slow, because fast breathing makes you lose more water. But slow feels dangerous too, because the wind steals heat faster than your muscles can make it. You are always balancing two losses: the loss of warmth, the loss of water, and somewhere behind them, the loss of judgment. You pass another group resting in the lee of a rock, headlamps clustered like a small campfire. One of them looks up at you, eyes wide and glassy. They ask how far to the summit, and their voice has a thin edge of pleading. You give them an honest answer, which is vague on purpose. Hours, still hours. Because if you give a number, their brain will latch onto it like a rope. And numbers do not hold up here. You keep climbing, and the dark begins to thin. Not sunrise yet. Just the sky turning from black to deep blue, like ink diluted slowly in water. The upper mountain starts to show shape, and that shape is discouraging. A huge shoulder, a wide slope that looks almost gentle, except you know what it is made of. Loose rock and wind. A long place where you can lose time without noticing. You approach the beginning of the Canaleta zone, and the terrain steepens into a more obvious chute. This is where the route becomes famous, not because it is pretty, because it is efficient at humiliating you, because the Canaleta is where the mountain stops pretending you are in control. It is a gully of loose rock that points straight up like an accusation. The path threads through it in a zigzag that never feels like progress. You step on something that looks solid, and it shifts like a bad promise. Your boot sinks, your heel slides, and your calf catches you before gravity does. Congratulations! You have reached the part where every step is a tiny argument with the ground. You angle your headlamp down, because looking up is a morale expense. The beam shows you a mosaic of shattered stone, dusted with thin ice. Some of it is volcanic rubble, light and porous, like dried sponge. Some of it is older sedimentary rock, fractured into plates, sharp as broken dinnerware. This whole slope is the Andes in a single mood, uplifted by tectonics, then chewed up by frost. Freeze and thaw, over and over, like a door being slammed for thousands of winters. Water sneaks into cracks during the day, then expands at night. Rock does not like expanding from the inside, so it breaks, and it breaks, and it breaks, until you get this gully, a place built from destruction, maintained by gravity, and perfected by wind. You plant your poles, and they bite into something, then skid. The tips scrape, and the sound is small, but it feels expensive. Your shoulders tense to stabilize, and you hear your breathing jump. In, out, in, out. It is not a rhythm now. It is a transaction. You keep the team close because the wind is stealing voices. Headlamps become the language. A wobble that says tired, a steady beam that says focused. A gust funnels down the gully and slaps Spindrift into your face. It is not pretty snow. It is grit with a winter costume. The grains find the gap between buff and goggles and sting your cheekbones. You blink hard and your eyelashes stick together for a second. Frost made from your own breath. You swallow and your throat feels like paper being folded. This is what the high desert does at altitude. Cold and dry, the worst partnership. Cold steals heat, dryness steals water, and hypoxia steals the part of you that would normally notice in time. You call for a micro break behind a bulge of rock. Not a rest, just a pause long enough to check faces. You shine your light on each person, briefly, like scanning barcodes. Pale lips, cracked corners, a crust of salt on a jacket collar, eyes that take a beat too long to focus. One teammate nods when you ask if they are okay, but the nod is delayed. Their brain is loading the response slowly. You tell them to drink, and they fumble for the bottle. The bottle is in the side pocket, easy at home, comedic up here. They pull, miss, pull again, and finally get it free. They take a sip, then cough, and the cough turns into a short gag. Not illness, just dry throat and thin air disagreeing about priorities. You turn your head to the slope above, where headlamps from other teams are drifting upward. They look like a slow swarm, stubborn, and not particularly intelligent. You have been one of those lights before. You are one of them now. The Canaleta steepens, and the zigzags shorten. That is how the mountain tells you the summit is closer. Not close, just closer. Your quadriceps begin to burn with a steady, clean ache. Not sharp pain, but fatigue that feels like something being poured into the muscle. You keep the pace boring, because boredom is safer than ambition. 10 steps. Breathe. 10 steps. Breathe. You do not count out loud, because counting turns into a weird prayer, and prayers make people desperate. A rock skitters down from above, clicked loose by someone else. It bounces once, then twice, then disappears into darkness below. It is not large, but it is loud enough to make everyone freeze for a second. You look up automatically, even though it never helps. Rockfall is a reminder, not a conversation. You move again, and you stay near the inside of the gully where debris is less likely to funnel. Less likely, not impossible. The wind rises, and it comes with a sound like tearing fabric. Your hood flaps, and the edge taps your ear in a steady, irritating rhythm. You want to fix it, to make it neat, to make the world feel tidy. But neatness costs finger time, and finger time costs heat. So you accept the annoyance. This is how survival rewires you, choosing discomfort on purpose. The sky behind you lightens, and dawn begins to leak in. Not a sunrise, more like the world quietly turning the lights on. The slope becomes visible beyond your headlamp beam. Gray and brown rubble, streaked with pale snow patches that look painted on. You can see the wind at work now, carving ripples into loose dust. Little dunes on a mountainside, like the desert forgot where it was. And that is the truth. It is the desert, just lifted into the sky. Aconcagua sits in a rain shadow, protected from Pacific moisture by the Andes themselves. Air rises over Chile, cools, drops its water, then crosses the crest dry and exhausted. By the time it reaches you, it is air that has already spent its generosity. So, the mountain is cold, yes, but also thirsty. Thirsty enough to pull moisture straight out of your lungs. You keep climbing, and the cold begins to find your toes. Not numbness yet, but a dull ache like bruises waking up. You wiggle them inside your boots, and you hope the movement is enough. Your feet are far from your heart, and your heart is already busy. One teammate behind you makes a small sound, a low groan that tries to be a joke. You stop and look back. They are leaning too hard on one pole. Their shoulders are uneven, and their head is tilted like they are listening to something. You ask if they are dizzy? They pause, then say, "No, just tired." Their voice sounds thick, not slurred yet, but slow. You move closer, shine your light on their face, and watch their pupils for a second. They blink. then blink again. Too deliberate. You ask them to walk a few steps toward you. They do it, but their feet drift slightly to one side. Not a stumble, just a lazy line. The kind of thing you would ignore at sea level. The kind of thing that becomes a headline up here. You look at the rest of the team, and you can feel the unspoken thought. Summit, so close. And you want to say something noble about goals. But the truth is simpler. Aconcagua does not care what you want. You tell the tired teammate to eat something, even if they hate it. They pull out a gel, squeeze, swallow, and grimace. You tell them to take 3 swallows of water. They do reluctantly, and their throat clicks when they swallow, dry as chalk. Then you keep moving, because standing still is a slow leak of heat. The gully becomes a staircase of unstable ledges. Each switchback is a small platform of rock plates, and every plate wants to slide. You place your foot, then test weight, then commit. It is slow, it is cautious. It is the only way to make it repeatable. You think about the summit ridge above, still not visible, hidden by the angle of the slope. That invisibility messes with the mind. You cannot see your goal, so your brain tries to invent shortcuts. It whispers, maybe it is just over the next rise. Maybe you can push harder. Maybe you can catch up to those lights. Maybe. You ignore it, because maybe is the voice of hypoxia wearing your face. The wind slams down again, and you feel your body sway. Your pack acts like a lever, and your boots scrape for grip. A gust like that can take a tired person and turn them into a falling person. You tighten the spacing again, and you tell the team to keep poles planted wide. 3 points of contact, like you are teaching toddlers to walk. But the toddlers weigh a lot and have ice axes. Dawn strengthens, and the upper mountain finally comes into view. A broad, wind-scoured shoulder that curves toward a ridgeline. The summit is still hidden, but the scale is now obvious. The top of this mountain is not a point. It is a long, exhausting dismissal. You climb out of the Canaleta onto the shoulder, and the wind hits you cleanly. No gully walls now. No partial shelter. Just open air accelerating over a high convex slope. The gusts come hard enough to make your jacket snap. The spindrift is thicker here, and it skates along the ground in sheets. You can see it moving, like smoke that hugs the rock. It pours over ridges and spills into hollows, then whips away again. Wind as a liquid, behaving like water, except it steals heat instead of giving life. You look down, and the route behind you is a pale scar of footprints. Some are crisp, some are already blurring. The mountain erases quickly when the wind is in this mood. You check the time, and it looks acceptable, but not generous. You check the tired teammate again, because time does not matter if brains are swelling. They are quieter now, not complaining, not joking. Quiet can be focus. Quiet can also be the first sign that someone is slipping inward. You ask them a simple question, something stupid on purpose. What is your favorite food back home? They stare for a second, then answer slowly. Their answer is correct, but the delay is longer than it should be. You nod, and you keep them near you. Above you, the slope rolls upward in a long, pale ramp. It looks almost manageable if you ignore the wind and the oxygen problem. That is the trick of high-altitude terrain. It looks easy, so you underestimate it. And underestimation is how you run out of margin. You keep moving, and the cold begins to creep into your hands. Not numbness yet, but stiffness. You flex your fingers inside your gloves, and you can feel the fabric crusted with frozen sweat. Your gloves were dry when you left camp. Now they are damp inside, because your hands are still sweating, even in cold. Sweat that cannot evaporate cleanly becomes frost. Frost becomes a cold sink that sits against your skin. You feel the first hint of clumsiness when you adjust a pull strap. The buckle resists, your thumb presses too hard, and you overshoot. A tiny mistake, but it makes your chest tighten with irritation because you know what comes next. If you cannot adjust a strap, you cannot fix a zipper. If you cannot fix a zipper, you cannot manage layers. If you cannot manage layers, you cannot manage heat. And heat loss up here is not dramatic, it is administrative. It is a series of small failures that stack up quietly. The tired teammate begins to lag again. Not much, but enough that the rope of the group stretches. You stop and wait, and your own body cools instantly. The wind cuts through the pause like a knife through cloth. You stamp your feet once, twice, trying to keep blood moving. You tell the group to keep moving slowly in place. Little steps, no standing still. It looks silly. It is effective. When the teammate reaches you, their breathing is ragged and they swallow hard. They say they feel sick. They say it like an apology, like they are inconveniencing you. You ask if they have a headache. They nod. You ask if they are nauseous. They nod again, and then they dry heave once. Nothing comes out, just the body rehearsing. This is the first major fork, arriving right on schedule. You can keep everyone moving up and hope it stays mild, or you can accept that mild at this altitude has a habit of becoming not mild. You look up at the slope, and you can feel the summit pulling at you. It is not visible, but it is present like a magnet. You look down, and you can see the line of camps, far below, tiny, unreal. The descent looks long, and that is what makes people hesitate, because going down feels like failure, and going up feels like progress. The mountain relies on that weakness. You kneel close to the teammate, shielded by your body from the wind. You ask them their name, even though you know it. They answer correctly. You ask where you are. They say Aconcagua and try to smile. You ask what day it is. They pause too long. Then guess. Your stomach tightens. This is not just discomfort. This is impaired cognition, the early edge of something that can turn into cerebral edema. Brain swelling, the skull is a rigid box, pressure rising, confusion deepening. It starts like a hangover, it ends like a shutdown. You tell the team you are turning them around. You say it flatly, like reading a weather report. One teammate protests immediately, not angrily, just reflexively. But we are close. You look at them and you let the wind fill the silence for a second. Close is a feeling, you say. Oxygen is a number. We do not have enough. The protest dies because everyone can hear the sick teammate breathing. It is not a normal rhythm. It is a shallow, fast pattern that feels panicked, even if they are not. You shift gear quickly, because quick is safer than debate. You move snacks into their pockets where they can reach them. You pull an extra layer out of your pack and wrap it around their torso. You check their hands because sickness makes people stop caring about cold. Their fingers are pale and the glove on one hand is slightly loose. You tighten it and you tell them to keep moving their fingers. They nod, but their eyes drift away for a second, not focusing on you. You clip them closer to you, not with a rope, but by position. You put them in front of you so you can watch every step. And then the mountain takes its fee for this decision. As you turn, the wind hits your side instead of your front. It shoves your pack and you twist to stabilize. Your mitten catches on a strap, just a little snag. You pull and the mitten slips. For a second you feel it, fabric against your wrist. Then the wind grabs it like it has been waiting. It lifts the mitten, spins it once, and flings it down slope. You lunge instinctively, one step, then stop. Chasing gear on loose rock is how people fall. The mitten bounces, tumbles, becomes a dark scrap against pale scree. Then it is gone, swallowed by a fold in the slope, erased by distance and wind. Congratulations, you have just lost a piece of your hand. Not literally, not yet, but functionally, yes, because now you have one less layer between skin and a wind that can freeze tissue quietly. You stare for one beat longer than you should, because anger is also oxygen. Then you force yourself to look away. You cannot afford to mourn fabric. You pull your spare glove liner out and you double it on the exposed hand. Not as warm as a mitten, but better than bare skin. You tuck that hand under your armpit. When you can, using your own body as insulation. This is how the mountain turns heroics into logistics. You start the descent, and the slope immediately shows you why down is not easy. Loose rock that was an obstacle going up becomes a conveyor belt going down. Your boots slide, and you have to brake with your heels. Braking burns thighs in a different way. A trembling strain that is harder to pace. The sick teammate moves awkwardly, not trusting their feet. They take short steps, and the short steps make them unstable. You coach them constantly. Step here, plant the pole, look at your feet. They obey, but slowly, like instructions arriving through fog. The wind continues to build, as if offended by your retreat. Spindrift thickens into stinging curtains, and it starts to reduce visibility. Not a blizzard, not yet. Just enough to make the world look smeared. Landmarks soften, edges blur, and your route becomes a memory rather than a thing. You look for your own footprints, and you realize they are less reliable than you hoped. Some have been filled by drifting snow. Some have been kicked apart by other climbers. Some go in the wrong direction because people make mistakes. And mistakes become paths because tired people follow what looks like a path. You keep the group tight and you call for frequent check-ins. Not because you want to talk, because talking forces a brain to prove it is still working. You ask the sick teammates simple questions every few minutes. Their answers stay mostly coherent, but their voice is weaker now. They stop volunteering words. They just respond. You watch their gait, and you notice they are dragging one foot slightly. Not from injury, from coordination slipping. You push them to drink again, even though they resist. They say it makes them feel worse. You tell them feeling worse is acceptable. Pass passing out is not. They take a sip and their eyes water in the wind. Tears freeze at the corners, forming tiny crystals that stick to lashes. You reach the top of the Canaleta again, and you angle toward the safer side for descent. Going down the gully is like walking down a pile of dinner plates. Each plate wants to skate. Each skate wants to turn into a slide. And a slide here is not dramatic at first. It is just speed you did not agree to. You face slightly sideways, using poles as brakes. The sick teammate imitates you, but their pole plants are sloppy. The tips bounce off rock, and you feel your stomach tighten again. You step closer, and you place your pole tip exactly where theirs should go. They follow, and you become a metronome. Step, plant. Step, plant. The wind roars through the gully, louder now, and you can hear small stones tinkling as they roll. Gravity is constantly sorting the mountain, pulling the loose stuff downward. And when the mountain sorts like that, it does not care if your legs are attached to the loose pieces. You keep your weight slightly back, because forward is how you accelerate without permission. You watch your sick teammates' heels, because heels tell the truth before faces do. Their steps are getting shorter, not from caution, from coordination thinning out. You say their name again, and you make them look at you. They look, but their eyes slide past your headlamp beam like it is slippery. That is your next data point, small, ugly, and very persuasive. You tighten formation again, because this gully punishes distance. A few meters above you, someone dislodges another rock. It clicks and bounces, and the sound makes everyone flinch at once. Flinching costs balance, and balance is already overpriced. You angle the group toward the inside edge, where the debris stream is thinner. Inside edge is not safe, it is just less stupid. The wind changes direction, briefly, and pushes Spindrift uphill. It is disorienting, like watching rain fall upward. You blink against it, and the crystals scrape your eyelashes. Your exposed hand, the one missing its mitten, starts to feel like a separate object. Not pain yet, just a dull, distant cold that suggests future paperwork. You flex your fingers inside the doubled liner, and you feel stiffness. You tuck that hand into your armpit again, and you keep one pole in the other hand. Congratulations. You are now descending a mountain with half your normal steering. You tell yourself you will swap hands every few minutes. You tell yourself a lot of things on the way down. The gully widens, and for a moment, you have the illusion of choice. Then you see the tracks, old tracks, new tracks, tracks that cut straight down like panic, tracks that zigzag like regret. At altitude, humans leave graffiti in the form of bad decisions. You choose the line you remember from the ascent, the one with slightly larger rocks. Larger rocks are annoying going up. Larger rocks are stability going down. Each step is still a negotiation, but now the ground holds for half a second longer. That half second, the sick teammate starts to breathe in little bursts, fast and shallow. You listen for coughing, because coughing up here is not always just dryness. It can be fluid in the lungs, the beginning of high-altitude pulmonary edema, HAPE, the acronym that looks tidy on paper and feels obscene in real life. Fluid where air should be, the body drowning on a dry mountain. You do not hear wet cough yet, You do hear a faint rattle when they inhale through their nose. It might be mucus. It might be nothing. It might be the first whisper of a problem that will not wait politely. So you speed the descent slightly, but not so fast that someone falls. You aim for controlled urgency, the rarest pace on Earth. The wind keeps roaring, and the gully acts like a speaker cone. Sound here is amplified and flattened at the same time. You can hear rocks, fabric, breath, but voices get shredded. You lean close when you speak, mouth near their ear. You tell them, eyes on feet, hands on poles, steady steps. They nod too quickly, like they are trying to end the conversation. You ask them to squeeze your glove with their hand. They do, weakly. Grip strength is another truth teller. Weak grip can be cold, can be fatigue, can be brain. You do not diagnose out loud. You just keep them moving. After a long stretch of controlled sliding, the angle finally softens. The Canaleta stops being a chute and becomes a slope again. Your thighs tremble, not from fear, from braking for too long. You feel the burn behind the kneecaps, that deep, sour ache. Down climbing taxes muscles you forgot you owned. You stop behind a rock bulge, the closest thing to shelter you will get. Not a rest, a service stop. You check hands and faces again, quick and clinical. Your exposed hand is pale at the fingertips, and the sensation is muffled. Frostnip? Probably. Not yet the black and waxy horror story, but the prologue is being written. You rub the fingertips against your palm through the liner, hard enough to hurt. Pain is information. Pain means the nerves are still sending messages. You look at the sick teammate's lips. They are dry, cracked, and slightly bluish at the edges. Cyanosis is a fancy word that means your blood is losing its color. You ask them to take sips, not gulps. They do. And then they gag again, dry and empty. Their stomach is refusing to cooperate because digestion is optional at altitude. You pull out a small handful of sugary chews and put them in their pocket. You tell them one every few minutes, even if you hate it. Sugar is quick fuel, and quick fuel is brain insurance. A gust hits your back while you are stopped, and cold crawls under your collar. You feel the temperature drop in your bones, like someone opened a door inside you. You decide you have done enough standing still. You start moving again, because motion is heat, and heat is time. Below, the shoulder begins to show the faint shapes of high camp tents. Tiny, gray, hunched things against a field of rock. You have never loved tents the way you love them right now, but you do not tell yourself you are safe. Not here. People get hurt close to camp because relief makes them sloppy. The slope is still loose. Your brain is still starved. The wind is still trying to push you sideways into gravity. You keep the sick teammate in the middle. Like a fragile package, you put the strongest mover in front to break the mental load of route finding. You take the rear because the rear is where falls happen. You feel your own breathing finally settle just slightly with each meter lost. The air does not become rich, it becomes less hostile. It is like moving from a room where someone is slowly turning down the lights. Your vision stays sharper when you have oxygen. Your thoughts stop stuttering so much. You realize, with a flash of irritation, how impaired you were up there too. You were just impaired in a functional way. Aconcagua does not only hurt the weak, it sands everyone down. The camp gets closer, and you can see people moving between tents. Small silhouettes bent forward, hands busy with stoves and guy lines. Survival chores, the kind you never appreciate at home. Boiling water, tightening knots, finding a snack you can tolerate. You smell stove fuel, again carried on the wind in short, sharp bursts. That smell lands in your brain like comfort. Then a gust scrubs it away, reminding you not to get attached. You reach the first tent line, and the wind hits harder between the rocks. Camp is not calm. Camp is just where humans insist on stopping. Your team shuffles through, boots scraping, poles clicking. You guide the sick teammate to your rock wall, the weak shelter you built earlier. You crouch them down behind it, and their shoulders sag like a tent losing poles. They are not collapsing dramatically. They are just losing the fight to look normal. You pull your stove out, even though your hands are stiff. You can feel the missing mitten as a constant absence. You try to pinch a buckle with your numb fingers, and you fumble it twice. Fine motor skills, continuing to evaporate. You force yourself to slow down. Fast hands make mistakes, and mistakes burn fuel. And fuel is everything here. You light the stove, and the flame catches with a reluctant hiss. The sound is thin in this wind, like a small animal trying to breathe. You build a rock shield around it, because the mountain will happily blow your heat away. You scoop dirty snow into the pot, and it collapses into gray water again. You do not bother wishing it was cleaner. Clean is a marketing term. The sick teammate sits with their head down, eyes half closed. You ask them to look at you. They do, slowly. You ask them their name again. They answer, but quieter. You ask what camp you are at. They hesitate, then get it right. Better. Not good, but trending toward functional. Descending is working, the only treatment this mountain respects. The water finally warms, and you pour a small amount into an insulated cup. You add a sugary drink mix, because plain water tastes like despair. You hand it to them, and you watch them drink. They sip, swallow, wince. Their throat is raw from dry breathing, like sandpaper inside. You make yourself drink too, because leaders also dehydrate. Your urine has been dark, and it will stay dark unless you fix it. Dehydration at altitude is a quiet accelerant, making every other problem easier to ignite. The wind slams into the tent line again, and fabric snaps all around you. Someone nearby is shouting at a guy line, trying to tie it with gloves on. They fail, swear, take a glove off, and instantly regret it. You hear the little gasp of cold. Congratulations. You have watched the ritual of cold weather mistakes in real time. You look upslope for a second toward where the summit would be. You cannot see it from here. You can only see the shoulder, a pale ramp disappearing into wind. It looks like nothing, like a simple incline. That is why people underestimate it, and that is why the mountain keeps collecting stories. You check the time again, and your stomach tightens. You are behind schedule now, because emergencies are never efficient. The weather window is closing too, because it always closes. You can feel the wind changing tone, deeper, more forceful. This is afternoon wind starting early. The mountain skipping ahead in the script. You have a decision, and it is not glamorous. Do you stay here and gamble on a calmer hour later, or do you drop lower now while you still can navigate? You look at the sick teammate. They are improving, but they are still fragile. You look at the rest of the team. Their faces are tight, lips cracked, eyes irritated. One person is rubbing their hands hard, trying to wake fingers up. Another is staring at their boots like the boots betrayed them. You recognize the look. It is the look of someone realizing the mountain is not a contest. It is a process, and processes do not care about your plans. You decide to go down now, not all the way to base camp in one push, but to get off this exposed shoulder. Lower altitude means thicker air. Thicker air means brains work better. Brains that work better make fewer mistakes. Fewer mistakes is the only luxury you can still afford. You pack quickly, and packing with stiff fingers is its own small misery. You shove items into the tent like you are feeding a hungry animal. You count essentials out loud because your memory is not reliable. Stove, fuel, water, first aid, headlamp, batteries. Extra layer? You touch your glove system again, feeling the missing mitten as a gap. You tuck chemical warmers into the doubled liner, hoping for a little artificial mercy. You tell yourself you will deal with real rewarming lower, in calmer air. You do not tell yourself you will be fine. Fine is what people say before they are not. You step back into the wind, and it hits like a wall. Spindrift scuds across the ground in sheets, making the surface look alive. Your goggles are already crusted at the edges, and you can see the world through a narrow, clean strip. The descent line out of high camp is not a single path. It is a braided mess, tracks weaving around rocks, through gullies, across slopes. In clear weather, it is tedious. In this, it is a puzzle with consequences. You pick the most traveled line because it is usually the least wrong. Usually. You keep the group close enough to touch if needed. A shoulder check every few minutes, counting bodies like inventory. 1, 2, 3, 4. Still here, still moving. The sick teammate's steps are a little stronger now, and that gives you a small release in the chest. Not relief, just less dread. You descend into the long traverses that connect the camp zones to lower slopes. Here, the terrain is wide open, and the wind has room to accelerate. It hits you from the side, pushing you toward the downslope void. You lean into it like a person walking with an invisible drunk friend. You plant poles wider, and you keep your center of gravity low. You make the team do the same, and they obey without argument now. Argument requires oxygen. The wind steals words anyway. Visibility begins to shrink, not because of darkness, but because of suspended grit and snow. Aconcagua does not need a storm cloud to blind you. It just needs enough particles in the air to turn distance into a blank wall. You can still see the next cluster of rocks. You cannot see the far ridgeline. You cannot see the subtle dips that mark the safest traverse. This is when people wander, not dramatically. Just a few degrees off over time, becomes a completely different gully. A different gully becomes steeper terrain. Steeper terrain becomes a fall, or a cliffed-out problem, or a long detour that burns hours. So you navigate by intimacy. Close landmarks, close spacing, frequent stops to confirm the shape of the land. You stop behind a boulder the size of a refrigerator. You take out the map, but the map is mostly a joke in this wind. Paper flaps, fingers fumble. and the lines do not match the whiteout. You rely on memory instead, which is terrifying and normal. You remember the angle of the traverse. You remember the direction of a particular rock rib. You remember a cairn that looked like a crooked tooth. Cairns are humanity's tiny attempt to negotiate with scale. Stones stacked to say, someone was here and lived. You find one of those cairns, half buried in drift, and you feel a small jolt of gratitude. Then you remember cairns also lead people astray when someone stacked them wrong. So you treat it as a suggestion, not a promise. You move again. The wind now carries a harsh ticking sound, grit hitting your jacket and pack, sand blasting, but it's 6,000 meters, with your face as the target. Your cheeks burn and then go numb. Numbness feels like relief until you realize it is just the nerve giving up. You check your exposed hand again. The chemical warmer is doing something. Faintly, your fingertips feel prickly, like pins under skin. That is good, in a painful way. Pain means blood is still visiting, but you do not rub too hard, because aggressive rubbing can damage cold tissue. You treat your hand like fragile fruit, a strange thing to do. While walking on a moving pile of rock, time stretches. Descent does not feel like progress the way ascent pretends to. Down is repetitive, the same careful steps, the same scanning for safe footholds. Your quads continue to tremble, and your knees start to complain. Not injury yet, just the ache of constant braking. You pass a small patch of ice, hard and smooth, wind polished. You step around it because traction is a rumor on that surface. One teammate does not see it in time, and their boot skims the edge. Their foot slides, they windmill once, and they catch themselves with a pole. The pole tip skitters, then bites. They recover. No fall, but their eyes go wide, and you can see the adrenaline spike. Adrenaline is another expensive fuel. It gives you strength, then leaves you tired. You tell them, slow, control, no rushing. They nod, breathing hard, and you keep moving. The sick teammate begins to speak again. Little comments, small complaints. Complaints are good. Complaints mean a brain has enough oxygen to be annoyed. You listen for coherence. You listen for that vacant quiet again. So far, it is getting better. That is the reward for giving up the summit. Not pride, not a lesson, just a person returning to themselves. You reach a section where the route drops more directly, and the wind funnels into a new channel. It slams into you with sudden force, and for a moment, you all stagger. The spindrift thickens into a brief white sheet, and the world disappears. You freeze, instinctively, because moving in zero visibility is how you walk off the wrong side of a slope. You hunch, backs to the wind, poles planted. You count again, close, voices muffled. 1, 2, 3, 4. All present, you wait, and the sheet passes in seconds, but the seconds feel long. The mountain can steal your confidence in a breath. When visibility returns, it is not much. A few meters, the next rock, the next shadow. You realize your own tracks are already filling in behind you. Not erased, but softened. It is like the mountain is editing the evidence. You continue down, and the air slowly becomes easier. Not easy, just easier. Your breaths feel slightly fuller. Your heart rate calms a fraction. You can think in longer sentences again. You start to remember things that are not the next step. That is how you know altitude was stealing you too. You see the outline of lower camp structures, not tents now, but the cluster near Nido de Condores, and then the drop toward Plaza Canada. Names that sound like comfort, but are still high, still exposed. The wind remains violent, but the gusts feel less sharp, less needle-like. The temperature rises slightly, or maybe you are just generating more heat now that you are not fighting as steep a grade. You take another brief stop behind a rock rib that blocks the wind enough to speak. You do a real assessment now, because now you can afford a few minutes. You check the sick teammate's breathing rate. It is slower, still fast, but not panicked. You ask about headache? Still there, but less intense. You ask about nausea? They shrug. Better? You ask them to walk a straight line for a few steps. They do, and the line is straighter. You watch their boots as much as their face, because feet tell the truth first. Their steps are still cautious, but they are no longer drifting like a loose shopping cart. That tiny improvement feels like a door unlocking in your chest. Not relief, just permission to think about the next problem. Because Aconcagua does not give you one emergency at a time. It stacks them like rocks in a cairn until the pile collapses. You check your own breathing, and you notice you can pull a fuller inhale. It is not rich air. It is just less insultingly thin. Your thoughts start arriving in complete sentences again. And that is when you notice how much you had been improvising up high. Hypoxia makes you feel competent right until it does not. It is like trying to run your brain on low battery mode with the screen dimmed. You keep moving because stopping invites cold to sit down in your muscles. The wind is still loud, but the gusts feel less like punches. They are still shoves, still insistent, just slightly less personal. You angle the group along the traverse you remember, aiming for the next rock rib. The landscape here is all muted color, brown scree, gray slabs, and thin, chalky snow. It looks like an abandoned construction site for a planet, which is basically what it is. Aconcagua is not one clean chunk of granite. It is a complicated stack of sediments and volcanic layers, folded and faulted by collision. Then, carved by ice that used to be bigger, and wind that refuses to retire. The wind is the constant worker here, doing overtime, sanding down any sharp edge, and sanding down your face while it is at it. You glance at the sick teammate again, and they finally look irritated. They squint into the grit, and they mutter something about their eyes. Congratulations. Annoyance is a sign of life returning. You keep the team close because visibility still comes and goes in curtains. A few meters of clarity, then a brief smear of white and dust. You navigate by shape. A darker ridge of rock, a dip where the track usually runs. The mountain has no signs, no railings, no helpful arrows. It has suggestions and consequences. Someone ahead stops to adjust a strap, and you see their bare wrist flash. You bark at them to keep skin covered, and they flinch like a scolded kid. You feel bad for half a second, then the wind hits your exposed hand. The missing mitten turns into a thought you cannot ignore. Your fingertips feel wooden, not numb, but distant. You flex them, and the movement is delayed, like the signal has to travel farther. You tuck that hand under your armpit again and keep one pole in the other. One pole is worse for balance, and balance is already underfunded. So you widen your stance and you make every foot placement deliberate. Down here, the slope is less steep, but it is more deceptive. Loose scree on a moderate incline is perfect for ankle twists. The rocks are small enough to roll and abundant enough to guarantee one will. You keep scanning the ground, looking for larger stones, more stable plates. You aim for the ugly spots because ugly usually means firm. Pretty, smooth scree is where you slide. A gust drives Spindrift into your goggles, and the lens fogs at the edge. You blink hard, and your eyelashes scrape the foam. You do not lift the goggles to wipe them, because that is how you frost your eyelids. Instead, you breathe slower, trying to reduce moisture inside. You have become a walking climate control system. Every breath is humidity management. Every layer is heat management. Every snack is energy management. And you are doing it all with a brain that is still recovering. The sick teammate stumbles once, a small misstep, and your body reacts before your mind. You reach out with your good hand, catch their shoulder strap, and steady them. They look back, embarrassed, and you shake your head. Embarrassment is for sea level. Up here, you just do the next correct thing. You make them stop for a breath. Then you move again immediately. You keep them drinking in tiny sips because big gulps trigger nausea. Their stomach is still offended by altitude, like it filed a complaint. You offer them a chew, and they grimace, then take it anyway. Chewing looks ridiculous in this wind, jaw working like a stubborn machine. But sugar hits the bloodstream faster than dignity. The wind shifts again, and for a moment, it comes from behind. That feels like mercy until you realize it pushes you downhill faster. Speed is not your friend on this rubble. You lean slightly into the slope, braking with edges of boots. Your quads complain, a deep ache that feels like old wiring overheating. You can feel the tremor in your thighs every time you pause. Fatigue is turning your muscles into unreliable equipment. And unreliable equipment is how falls happen on the easy parts. You spot another cairn, half collapsed, a small stack of stones. It points vaguely along the traverse, like a shrug. You follow it anyway, because even a shrug is information. The air thickens by degrees you cannot measure, only feel. The feeling is subtle, like a room becoming less crowded. Your chest expands a little easier. Your head feels less stuffed with cotton. You can hear more than just wind and breath now. You hear the click of poles on rock. You hear the scrape of boots. You hear someone behind you mutter, "I hate this mountain." And you almost laugh, because hate is also a sign of oxygen. You round a bend where the terrain drops slightly, and the wind slackens for a moment. It is not calm, but it is less violent. In that lull, you smell something unexpected. Humanity, stove fuel, sweat, and the faint sourness of tents that have been lived in too long. It means you are approaching a lower camp zone where people are still pretending to be comfortable. Your shoulders loosen for the first time in hours. Then you catch yourself, because comfort is when you stop paying attention. You keep your eyes on the sick teammate. They are talking now, short sentences, complaining about their head. Headache is still there, but it is less sharp. You ask them again what day it is, and this time they answer correctly. That answer is like a small flag planted in their brain. Orientation, returning. You keep moving because returning is not the same as safe. Altitude sickness can improve and then spike again if you stall too high. Down is the treatment, and the prescription is more down. You reach the camp area and you see tents crouched behind rock walls. Some are shredded at the edges, patched with tape like old injuries. People move slowly between them, bent into the wind like they owe it money. A stove hisses somewhere, steady and stubborn. You guide the team through, not stopping long, just using the rocks as brief shelter. You tell one teammate to check their toes quickly, then cover them again. They pull a boot slightly open, peek, and nod. No obvious white patches, no waxy skin. Good enough for now. You check your exposed hand again, and you see the fingertips are pale but not dead white. The sensation is still dull, but there is pain when you pinch. Pain is good in this very specific way. You keep the chemical warmer pressed in place, and you do not let your hand dangle. Hands dangling is how blood gives up. You stop behind a rock wall, and you do a quick triage like a tired accountant. Water levels, low. Fuel, enough to melt a little if you must. Snacks, mostly frozen bricks. Team morale, fragile but functioning. The sick teammate, improving. The wind, still climbing the scale. You make the decision to continue descending, even if it means arriving late. Because higher camps are exposed debt, and lower camps are at least a chance to pay interest. You tell the team the plan in simple terms. Keep moving, no long stops. Drink on schedule, not on thirst. Check hands and feet every hour. If anyone feels sleepy, they say it out loud immediately. Sleepiness at altitude is not cozy, it is suspicious. They nod and you start moving again. The route drops into broader, dustier slopes. Less snow now, more grit. The mountain shifts back into its true identity, high desert with an ice problem. The wind uses the dust like ammunition. It stings your cheeks and it gets into your teeth. You taste minerals when you breathe, like you are inhaling the mountain itself. That taste is not imagination. It is rock ground fine traveling into your lungs. Erosion is not a scenic concept here. It is airborne, and it is intimate. You descend across a long traverse that feels endless. A diagonal line etched into rubble. Above you, the slope rises in a broad curve toward the invisible summit. Below you, the valley opens, and the clouds sit like a low ocean. It looks peaceful from this angle, but you know what is happening in that cloud layer. Moisture pooling below because the cold, dense air is trapped. The mountain is too high for that water to climb. The Andes create their own weather boundaries like a wall you can feel in your bones. Speaking of walls, your own body has been a wall all day, holding back failure. It is tired of the job. You feel hunger now, actual hunger, not just obligation. That is another subtle sign of improvement. Digestion is coming back online. Grudgingly, you pull out a snack and you bite into it. It is hard, but you can chew it without gagging. You swallow and it sits in your stomach like a stone. But it stays. That is a win. The sick teammate eats too, slowly, and does not immediately regret it. You keep watching their breathing. No wet cough, no bubbling sound, just dry, irritated airways. Dry is bad, but it is not drowning. You keep going. The wind hits again, harder, and the world shrinks briefly into a gray smear. Another spindrift sheet, another moment of waiting, with poles planted. You count again, because counting is grounding. 1, 2, 3, 4. Still intact. When it clears, you see tracks veering off to the side, heading into a different gully. It looks plausible, like a shortcut. Shortcuts on mountains are usually debts with hidden fees. You ignore it, and you stay on the line you trust. Trust here is not faith. It is memory plus evidence. You keep losing altitude, and you begin to feel the sun's heat in the wind breaks. Not warmth, just a slight easing of the cold. The light is harsh, and it makes every surface glare. Your eyes ache behind goggles. You blink slowly, and the lids feel gritty. Dust has worked under the foam and into the corners. You will be picking it out later, like sand after a beach day, except the beach is at 5,000 meters, and the ocean is clouds. Hours pass in a rhythm of careful steps and tiny checks. You stop behind rocks, sip, chew, flex fingers, then move again. Your body is a system of small maintenance tasks. Neglect one, and the cascade starts. The sick teammate is now moving with more confidence. Their feet land more squarely. Their pole plants are less random. They even make a joke about how the mountain stole your mitten. The joke is bad, and that is perfect. You answer with a tired laugh, and you feel a little anger drain away. Anger is expensive, and you have already spent enough. Eventually, the terrain begins to widen into the approach toward Plaza de Mulas. You recognize the shape of the valley, even through haze. The long, dusty moraines, the pale lines of dry stream beds, the scattered boulders like dropped cargo. Moraines are glaciers' old furniture, piles of debris left behind when ice retreats. Aconcagua once had much bigger ice than it wears now, not because it was kinder, but because climate shifted and the glaciers pulled back. They left rubble in their wake, like a messy tenant moving out. Now you walk on that rubble, and the mountain pretends it was always like this. The wind does not let up, but the air is kinder. You notice you can talk without gasping. You can look up and hold the whole landscape in your head again. That alone feels like luxury. You see the first larger clusters of tents at base camp, a little city of fabric. From up high, it looked tiny. From here, it looks like a fragile human thought set down in a hostile place. And it is. You feel your pace quicken slightly, not from energy, from the promise of shelter. You remind yourself again, out loud, that relief makes people trip. So you slow back down and you watch your footing like it is the only job. Because right now, it is. The last descent into base camp is a long, dusty grind. The ground is soft in places, like ash, and each step kicks up a small cloud. You are breathing rock again, but at least you can breathe. You pass other climbers heading up, faces fresh, gear tidy, hope still intact. They ask how it is higher up. You give them the honest version, stripped of drama, wind, cold, loose rock, turnaround decisions. They nod, but you can see they are not really hearing you. They are hearing their own story instead. Everyone does, until the mountain edits it. You guide your team into the base camp perimeter, and the soundscape changes. More voices, more stoves, the occasional clink of metal, the soft thump of someone's boots being dumped outside a tent. Human life, messy and comforting. You check in with staff and rangers, because mountains are also paperwork. You report the sick teammate's symptoms, the improvement, the descent. They nod, serious but not shocked, because they have heard this story too many times. They offer to monitor, maybe give oxygen if needed. Oxygen at base camp is not a summit sheet. It is a medical tool used when the mountain has already made its point. You get the teammate into a tent, lying down, insulated warm drinks ready. They look exhausted, but their eyes are clearer. They say thank you, quietly, like they are ashamed. You tell them the truth. You did not ruin the summit. The summit was never owed to anyone. Survival is the only actual achievement here. You step out of the tent, and you finally notice how wrecked you feel. Your shoulders are sore from bracing against wind. Your quads are trembling like you ran down a staircase for hours. Your lips are cracked so deeply they sting when you smile. Your throat feels sanded from the inside, and your hand, the missing mitten hand, is starting to throb. Throbbing is blood returning, and it hurts like it is supposed to. You sit behind a low rock wall, out of the worst wind, and you begin the slow inventory. Not gear first, body first. Toes, painful but present. Fingers, stiff but moving. Skin on cheeks raw and hot, wind-burned like a slow sunburn. Head, heavy, dehydration headache pressing behind the eyes. Stomach, unsettled but not mutinous. Congratulations, you have made it back to a place where problems are mostly manageable. Now the mountain turns into consequences. You drink water, and it tastes like plastic and life. You force yourself to drink more, because thirst still cannot be trusted. Dehydration lingers, and it makes your blood thicker, your head worse, your mood uglier. At altitude, dehydration is not just discomfort, it is reduced circulation, and reduced circulation is what frostbite likes. You unwrap your hand carefully, inside the tent where the wind cannot interfere. The fingertips are pale, with a faint waxy look at the very ends. Not black, not blistered, but not normal either. Frost nip. The warning shot. You rewarm gently, skin against warm fabric, not hot water, not aggressive rubbing. You let it sting, because stinging means nerves are waking. Pain is a gift you do not appreciate until it is gone. Outside, the wind hits the camp again, and tents snap like sails. The weather window you had hoped for is closing, loudly. You can hear it in the way gusts come more frequently now. The mountain is done negotiating, and it is moving on to enforcement. You meet with the rest of the team briefly. Faces tired, eyes gritty. No one says the word summit, not directly. It hangs there anyway, like an uncashed check. Someone asks if you think it will calm tomorrow. You look up at the ridgeline, where clouds are beginning to feather. You listen to the gusts. You smell the dry dust in the wind. You have learned to read these signs like a tired librarian reading overdue notices. You tell them the likely truth. It could calm, briefly. It could also get worse, and the sick teammate cannot go back up, not safely, even if they feel better. The risk of relapse is real. Altitude sickness is not always a one-time lesson. Sometimes it is a pattern, and the next chapter is worse. You decide, as a group, to commit to full retreat. Not a dramatic evacuation, just a long walk out. The administrative reality begins immediately. Packing, sorting trash, because even here you cannot leave everything behind. Checking out with rangers, confirming mule logistics, making sure no one is quietly deteriorating in the corner. You look at your teammate again, and they are sleeping now. Normal breathing, no gasping. That is a good sign, but you still watch for pauses. Shane Stokes can continue lower too, lingering like an echo. Sleep does not fix altitude. It just gives your body time to attempt repairs. You crawl into your own tent, and you finally let yourself lie down. The sleeping bag feels like an old friend, and you hate that your first thought is gratitude, because gratitude means you were closer to trouble than you want to admit. You close your eyes, and the wind noise fills the fabric above you. Flap, snap, flap. The sound does not let your brain go quiet. It keeps you lightly awake, like a radio left on low volume.